Hi and welcome to the Straight from the Table Northern version 2025. We're just back from our BNBF Northern qualifier, the last qualifier of 2025, and it was a real humdinger with over 90 competitors. It was a real headache for the judges because there was some real talent throughout the classes. We'll start with our overall, and our overall was taken by our lightweight Joshua Shekel, and I've probably pronounced that wrong again, and I'll apologise in advance because I really have problems with that name. But we didn't have problems with his physique. A very talented lad, very well balanced. Not an overall winner in this case. Some of the other guys did get votes from the judges, but he was the one that came out on top this time and also won the best wheels. Alec, what did you think of the overall?
Yeah, pretty hard to judge, to be honest with you. Different shapes and sizes. I think for me, it was between a heavyweight winner, who's Elliot Gibson. We then had a middleweight winner, who was, I believe, a German gentleman. Yeah, Matthias Wimmer, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And then Joshua Schickel, we'll say that. So yeah, I think all obviously, being a light, middle, heavy, all, different strengths and weaknesses. For me, it was really down between Elliot and Joshua. Elliot, obviously, huge gentleman weighing in, I think, 99 kilos, a lot of muscle, very impressive, chest, arms, potentially a little bit lacking a little condition through the glutes and hams, but I think it's probably where Joshua kind of nipped in. So although obviously Joshua, being a lightweight, very complete, very balanced, a lot of, thick, heavy muscle, great condition, especially through the glutes and hams. Slight knock on Joshua, a little bit narrow would be the only thing, but I think it was really Joshua's kind of depth of muscle, the detail of his physique and his condition that carried him into the win against the heavyweight Elliot. So a very, very impressive overall and a great win for Joshua. And
I think that even the team got dragged into the middle at one point because he was a very impressive team, but we'll come back to him later. We also had our overall female winner, who was Diana Suri, I think that's how you pronounce it. Suri. Diana did both figure and bodybuilding. I think the bodybuilding probably was her strength. Yes. Yeah, with very, very powerful quads, nice shape, good shoulders and arms. A little bit work could be done on her posing just to actually accentuate what she had. And that's not a criticism, that's just something that she can work on for the British finals. But a really lovely overall winner, and she beat our athletic girl Hannah and our masters figure, which I think was Heather.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Both good examples, and again, both hopefully we'll look forward to seeing at the British finals holding their own against some of the other girls. I think it makes for some really good, challenging classes for the women as well. But well done, Diana. You held your own and won your first overall. So well done. Our first class of the day was actually our teens. Unusually, we put the teens on earlier just with it being such a big show, and that was won by William Bancroft. And then in second place we had Lewis Musa, followed by Jack Rickard, and then Tristan Gerard. Alec, do you want to talk about our teen class?
Yeah, I can do. I think, to be honest with you, William there, straight first, very impressive. Lovely level of condition, lovely level of muscularity, symmetry. As you say, Vic, in the overall actually got pulled in for a look, against some really good guys in there. So, William is very polished, potentially the best teen I think we've seen all season. Very impressive. So straight first for me. Then Lewis in second, nice level of muscularity, good level of condition. Just didn't have enough firepower to take on William, who was exceptional, to be fair. Quite close between Lewis and Jack Rickard for me in third. Jack actually probably slightly better condition than Lewis, but maybe not just quite as complete. But both, Lewis and Jack I thought were excellent. And then Tristan, had a nice blend of everything, but not quite enough of everything to take on the top three. But I thought that the top three in particular were a fantastic standard, and look forward to seeing them at the Britain at the end of September.
We really have had strong teen classes throughout all our qualifiers, and I think, you're saying the best we've seen, but thinking back to even the Southern and the chunky lad that was there, and I can't remember his name offhand, but our team winners this year have been really, really powerful. And if they all come to the British finals, that's going to make for some event. So well done. And I spoke to the teenagers before they went on stage and just said, there will be a first and there will be a last, but realistically, you've all set yourself up really, really well for going into the future because they all had muscle. And as a teenager, that's tough to do. So well done to all our teenagers throughout the season so far. And as I say, hopefully we'll see a few of you in Perth for the finals in a few weeks' time. So we went from our teens to our masters class, and our masters class was taken by Sean Lamont, followed by Will Cruikshank, and then Jonathan Green in third. And I think we had Ed Gehring-Brown got fourth and Kevin Cassidy got fifth. Alec, do you want to have...
Yeah, I'll talk through this one. I think just a quick word on Ed Gehring-Brown in 4. I really felt for Ed because I know you've been to the British final before and you improved from the qualifier. You just ran into 3 really good guys on the day. So Ed, I do think you've got a great physique. Your conditioning was good. You posed really well. Unfortunately, you just ran into a really, really good lineup. So, tough lines there. Sean took the win, lovely amount of muscle. Conditions needs to come up for the final, I would say. But a serious amount of muscle for a Masters competitor. Really powerful up top, crazy X-frame. So very impressive physique. Kind of polar opposite, Will Cruikshank in second, absolute granite. Great condition. Obviously just won the Scottish there a couple of weeks ago. So kind of, polar opposite. But I think, Sean just had too much symmetry and muscle, even though his condition wasn't on par with Will's, for Will to kind of overturn that. And then Jonathan Green in third. Arms to die for. Unbelievable. Huge amount of muscle there. So Graham, beg your pardon, Jonathan Graham. Huge amount of muscle up top. Legs probably just don't quite match, and the condition needs to come up for the final again. But to be honest, I think if Jonathan, brings a serious level of condition to the final, I believe he's actually from Perth, so I look forward to seeing him there. He could be very dangerous. So it could be a dark horse for the final because he's got a very impressive physique.
Yeah, our master, like our teenagers, our masters are very strong, and not just our masters are over 50s and over 60s. We really have got some strong masters and strong teenagers this year, so that it was fun to watch. Our over 50s was won by Gary Huntley, and in second place was Paul Elliott, who I think's won or second in most of the shows this year. And in third place we had Milan Korkov, and in fourth place Matt Barlow, followed by Robert McFarlane and then Chris Flanagan. Again, another strong class and very, very different top 3. So again, I wasn't judging, so I don't like to say too much. So I'll leave Alec to give most of the feedback and I'll just chuck some in.
Yeah, by all means, fire away, yeah. For me, I think actually Gary was, straight first for me. Great level of condition, a lot of muscularity, quite a thick, rugged physique. Paul, I think, better in the symmetry round, but just lacked the condition that Gary had. I think that was the difference. I think if condition was comparable, Paul potentially could edge that, but it wasn't. Gary was much harder, and that was really the differentiating factor. And then Milan in third, nice version of Milan. Good level of condition, very nice in the symmetry round. Just needs a little bit more firepower, muscularity-wise, especially up top to take on Paul and Gary, who are both quite muscular gentlemen.
Thank you. Again, our over 60s. We have some amazing over 60s. Our over 60s was won by Keith O'Connell, followed by Gareth Norman, and then Alex Devine. And we also had Super Ted, our over 80s champion at 84, still up there, and he brought the house down. Again, Alec, I'll pass to you to make comment on our class.
Yeah, no, of course. As always, great to see Ted up there. 82? 83? 84, sorry. Yeah. Unbelievable. Always an absolute delight. As you say, the audience really got behind him, so it's great to see Ted as there on a BNBF stage. Really nice class. I was actually quite tight between Keith and Gareth, in 1 and 2. Keith probably just had slightly thicker muscle bellies, probably slightly better condition. Gareth potentially slightly better shape, a little bit more neat condition needed, but posed very well. I think second show of the season, so looked great. And then Alex Devine in third had a phenomenal routine, one of the best routines of the day. So Alex, thank you very much for that. I know myself and the rest of the judges very much enjoyed it, so thank you.
Thank you. Our Masters figure was next up, and our winner was Hazel Robinson, followed by Lisa Fife, and then Joanne Young. Again, I didn't judge the class, but looking on from the evening and what I did see during the day, Hazel was probably the clear winner just on balance, top to toe. Although Lisa was probably the best version of Lisa I've seen. More confident on stage, better condition, so she did really, really well. Joanne's got a lot of work to do. I think that's possibly her first time, and she definitely needs to be a lot harder to be competitive with the top 2. But nice to see the 3 girls up there, and they did all seem to have a great time. So well done, girls, and we'll see some of you at the Britain. That was followed by our men's athletic class, which was won by Christian Hawkins, then Josh Morris, and then Simon Doucet. And then fourth place was Ian Donald. We only had one female athletic competitor, and Hannah Mitchell, and she opted to come out with the guys, and she held her own and had a bit of fun rather than having to come out on her own. So it was good to see her up there. But I'll let you talk about them, Alec.
Yeah, I think straight first for Christian for me. Christian was an absolute standout. Good level of condition, nice level of muscularity. Really nice pecs and abs. More condition needed for the final, Christian, I would say. It could be, obviously British final, you do need to kind of, bring the condition up. But, a very good version of Christian. Josh in second, didn't quite obviously have Christian's level of muscularity or condition, but, nicely balanced physique. Very much fitted the criteria, I thought. And then Simon in third, I actually noticed on my sheet, Simon was probably better in the classic class. Also, his routine at night was very classic. Obviously, this class athletic is based on condition. That's what we're looking for. We're not judging a symmetry round, and we're not judging a routine in terms of, how it's performed in terms of, being classical. So Simon, I think potentially you were in the wrong class, and that's, I think why certainly for my sheet that, you came in third, because that's, the criteria for athletic. So potentially Simon next time out, potentially consider classics. I think that would suit your physique better.
Yeah, a comment on just Christian. Christian has competed with us for a few years, and I'm a bit like what you're saying with Simon. He couldn't understand why he wasn't placing where he thought he should. But when we sort of explained to him that it's a condition class, he's got that this year, and I think this year he's brought condition, and he's posed to show condition rather than show shape, and that's made a massive difference. And I'll just comment on Hannah. Hannah was nicely balanced, posed really well. If she wants to stick with athletics, she definitely needs to be harder. She didn't really have the condition that some of the girls will have at the finals, but she will pose her way into good places because she does make good shapes on stage. But yeah, I think that if you're going to bring it to the final, Hannah, harder still. Okay, from our athletic class, we went on to our junior class. Our junior class was phenomenal. It really was. The class was taken by Lewis Dempster. Second was Jaden Moore, with Luca Meese and Julian Shanky in fourth, and then Jonathan Rogers in fifth. But it was a stacked class of a ton of talent. I'll let you unravel that one.
Thanks, Vic. That's good. Good of you. Brilliant class. They all came out, and I think all the judges were like, "Wow, this is an absolute monster of a class." So, I think it ended up being, for me, a relatively easy decision in the end once it went around a few times. Lewis, for me, in the end, straight first, really based on his condition. That's what really carried him in. Lewis has got a great physique, nice level of muscularity, but his condition was, a standout in the class. And I think that's really what elevated him past Jaden. Jaden's got a ton of muscle, really thick muscle bellies, very impressive amount of muscle for a junior, but just lacked Lewis's condition. Jaden came to the end for feedback, which was great. And I think, as we said, Jaden, just more condition. So 3 weeks to dial it in.
Jaden could be very dangerous in the finals.
Agreed. Yeah, very much so. I think just the condition, that's the only thing that's...
and it's not miles away. No, it's not miles away. We were talking like he's not in condition. He just wasn't in the condition of Lewis. But he's a dangerous kid.
Agreed. Yeah, no, very impressive. Very, very impressive. Then in third, we had Luca Meese, who was, structurally, very large bodybuilder. Just a little bit softer, especially at night. I think I was looking at him for kind of second, to be honest with you, but then at night he was significantly softer than at pre-judge, and I think that's kind of what tipped him into the third place there. But a lovely balance physique and a lot of muscle. Fourth, Julian Sankey. In terms of probably, from a symmetry perspective, probably the standout bodybuilder within the class, just lacked condition. That was probably the big thing there, just needed more condition. And then obviously Jonathan in fifth, nice level of muscularity, just needed a little bit more of everything to be competitive with the rest of the guys.
Yeah, it was one of my favourite classes of the day, actually. Just as I say, I wasn't judging, but I was watching during the day, and to see that much talent, it was lovely to watch. As I say, I didn't envy you guys having to make the choice, but I did think Jaden a little bit tighter. Could be.
Yes.
He'd be a worry for me if I was competing in the junior class at the finals.
Very fair.
Okay, and next up was our figure class, which was won by overall champion Diana Suri, and second was Megan Robertson, and then Regan Daniels, and then in fourth place was Nikki Rogers. Again, I wasn't judging, so I don't like to say too much, so I will let you make most of the comments.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think an interesting one. I think in terms of if we're talking about the best figure on the day, I would suggest it was Megan Robertson. However, Megan's condition wasn't quite where it needed to be, and that's why that Megan then landed in second. Diana obviously did both bodybuilding and figure. I'd say Diana's better suited to bodybuilding, just with her level of muscularity. She hasn't quite got the X-frame that we're looking for in figure, whereas Megan does. However, Megan's condition wasn't quite where it needed to be, and that's kind of how that one rolled out. And then Regan in third, nice level of condition, posed well, just needed a little bit more muscle, to be honest with you, even though it's a figure class, just to really accentuate her physique, kind of bring out that X-frame. Nice level of condition and pose nicely.
Yeah, it's a hard one because when we're talking about figure and we talk about shape and then we talk about some need muscle, because it's an aesthetic class, the muscle sometimes what gives you the shape.
Exactly.
So, but some girls actually are naturally, like Megan's naturally got a figure.
Yes.
And I get what you mean about that, whereas Regan needs a little bit more muscle to give her shape.
Yeah.
So that it can come across as quite confusing when we're sort of saying one person needs more muscle, the other person doesn't. But it's about creating an X shape. And I think you're right in that Megan had a very, very good X shape. Diana, to me, was a bodybuilder all day long. But held her own and won the figure class. Yeah. So there you go.
There we go.
Yeah. Next up was another humdinger class for you judges because it was the novice class, and the novice is always hard work, and this one was no different. There was a lot of talent, and we had in first place Pascal Best, followed by Oliver Walton, then Fabian Vida, then Josh Spencer, and then Marshall Rothwell in fifth. And I for me, and as I say, I wasn't judging, so I don't like to say, but Josh Pleath that got I think sixth place. Yeah. To me, I would have had him higher in the mix. I thought he had a lovely balance. Could have been a little bit harder, but I thought a little bit of a hard one on him. So I felt a little bit for Josh. But again, I wasn't judging, so I'll let you explain how they got their places.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, echo that, Vic. It's very tight, I think, across the board. I think, so Pascal in first, very flashy from the front, nice level of condition, kind of front to back and, nicely muscled. But I think it was really kind of Pascal's condition and he had beautiful skin tone. He did.
Really, it was hard to make. Skin tone was beautiful.
He was very polished. I think he's probably the best away, especially for a novice class. Very polished, posed, very nicely. Very balanced top to toe. So that's what we kind of, made Pascal stand out. Oliver Walton in second, nice level of, kind of thick, grainy muscle. Just didn't quite have the condition of Pascal. But, a very promising physique in Oliver. We then had Fabian in third, who was an absolute chunk of a human, quite tall as well, must have been kind of 6+, but just lacked the condition and probably the completeness that Pascal and Oliver had, and that's kind of why he kind of wound up in third. Then for me, I was completely split between Josh, Marshall, and who was the gentleman you just referenced?
Josh, the other Josh.
The Josh, sorry, there we go.
Josh Pleath,
yeah. So that for me, I had them all tied up, and I think I could have really gone either way. I think in the end, just Josh Spencer's level of muscularity up top and his condition in his upper half really carried him. Legs a little bit weaker, so Josh, they need to come up going forward. And then obviously Marshall and Josh Pleath just didn't have Josh's level of condition. But probably better balance. So it was a real tough one. And to be honest with you, I really felt, those three could have gone a different way for me.
So after the top three, you're talking about 4, 5, 6.
Exactly. Could have flipped a coin, really, for me, really tight.
Which is normal when you get a big novice lineup because they are all learning. And I think what they've
strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, and what they've got to take from that is they've all stepped on the ladder, they've found where they are, and they need to look at where they've got to go from here. So great. So after our novice, we actually had our women's bodybuilding, which was won by Diana Suri, and second was Bev Gray, followed by Hannah Mitchell, and then Nikki Rogers. I think we've spoken about Diana. Diana had great quads, great glutes, good hamstrings, lovely shoulders, nice abs, good balance. And again, she's going to be a force come the Britain. I mean, I think the women's bodybuilding class at the British finals, if all our winners turn up, it's going to be absolutely phenomenal, and I'm really excited to watch it, which will be great. So Diana, thank you for bringing that package. Again, all I would say is there's a couple of your poses I looked at and thought, you could make yourself look better, and I say please don't take that as a criticism. It's an easy fix and it's sometimes good to know, but look at your pose and there's a couple that could make you look better. Bev Gray was very, very hard in the upper body, but not as hard in her glutes and hams. And I think she had a lot of muscle, but the glutes and hams need to be tighter to be able to take on somebody like Diana. Hannah didn't quite have in third place, Hannah Mitchell didn't have the muscle for the 1 and 2. And in fourth place, Nikki Rogers. Nikki has got muscle and she has got shape, but again, Nikki's come in soft. I mean, she has been invited to Britain, so she's got 3 weeks to try and make a difference, and hopefully she can come in harder, because we say it a lot with Nikki, but we can see she's got things going on, but she's still not really given us her best yet. And I keep looking for the day that Nikki's going to turn up at her best and shock us all. So, Nikki, please do. So after our women's bodybuilding was our classic men's bodybuilding, which was won by Konstantin Koch, and then Jack Mathers was second, and then Tim Schielerman was third, and Delonte Simpson was fourth, and Dominic Vacht was fifth. Again, that was a tough one. I mean, again, I was watching, not judging, but Delonte must have been a bit of a funny one for you guys, because to me, he was either going to be first or fourth. You were either going to take what he had and give him first and say that he had the aesthetics and the shape and the balance, or you were going to say he was a bodybuilder and not as classic as some of the other guys. And so I was interested to see which way that would go. And I actually really liked Delonte Simpson. But again, for me, I wasn't judging, so I'll take the what you guys say and what you saw on the day.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think to honestly point out best classic class of the season. Some really strong athletes within this. So great to see. I think in first, Konstantin just had the best, especially from the front, very flashy, real X shape from the front and posed to accentuate it, posed very classically. Not quite as strong as Jack Mather in second from the back. Jack, ton of muscle, great level of condition. Potentially for me, not typically classic, but more of a rugged physique. So I'm not sure if Jack would fare better, potentially in the middleweights in the men's open. But Konstantin was just more, classic in terms of how he posed and just how he went in and out in terms of an X frame than Jack, even though Jack was more muscular. So that's kind of how I saw that one going. Tim Schleierman in third, slightly more in the mold of Konstantin in terms of, really classic X shape, but didn't have enough, muscle, size and density to take on Konstantin and Jack there. And then, as you say, Vic, Delonte in fourth, just condition. Even though this isn't a condition class, I think, unfortunately, he was just so far behind for me, condition-wise. But if we're talking about an X frame and, in terms of having a load of muscle, then Delonte's probably the best in the class. So I think potentially a little bit more condition, and that could have gone a different way. But I think very, very impressive. And then Dominic Vacht in second, nice level of condition, but just didn't have quite enough of everything to take on the rest of the guys. But yeah, for me, class of the season in terms of classic bodybuilding.
I mean, you can see again that there was so much variables there again in that classic bodybuilding class, and one of the things when you have classes like classic and athletic, it's a little bit more difficult because it is a little bit more subjective than straightforward bodybuilding when we know exactly what we're looking for.
Exactly.
It always throws up dilemmas in certain places. Yeah, so that we did have our 3 men's weight classes. I mean, we had something, I think we had 22 in total, so we had quite well balanced classes. I think we had 8 originally in the lightweight with Joe Baker. Didn't bother coming back at night. He decided he wasn't up for it. He didn't feel right, didn't feel as if it was the right thing for him to do. So he opted out in the evening, which was a shame because I think during the day he actually would have been in the mix. I mean,
he was in my mix, very much in my mix. So
I mean, I have reached out to him and said, we'd love to see you if you feel up to it, come into the Britain, because I think he was a Britain level competitor. 100%. So even though he didn't make it, there was issues with his own issues, which he spoke to me about, and that we'll leave it at that. But Joe, if you're listening and you still want to do the Britain, we'd more than love to have you.
Yeah, very quick. I thought Joe looked excellent. Just a bit more condition needed, but I thought level of muscularity and Joe's got a champion level physique, so we'd love to see him at the Britain.
Yeah. So our lightweight was won by our overall winner, Joshua Schleckel. Second was Chris Paley, and third was Connor Lewis. Fourth was Paul Unger, and fifth was Oliver Kennerer. A very strong lightweight class.
Yeah, talk about a dilemma. This was a dilemma for me, to be honest with you. This was really, really tight. For me, especially, it was kind of a three horse race between obviously Joshua, Chris, and Connor. I'll just kind of touch on them kind of individually, and then Kobe's going to wrap it up. I'll spend a little bit more time on this one because it was very tight. So, Joshua obviously was our winner. I think Joshua just had, an extra degree of, muscularity and condition that the other competitors, didn't have. A little bit narrow from the back. It's probably the only knock on Joshua. But certainly in all the other poses, a lot of muscle, a lot of separation, and a lot of great level of condition in his glutes and hams. Then, for me, then between obviously, Chris and Connor. So, Chris, I think we know brings an exceptional level of condition. I think probably, unmatched on a stage that you'll see. Obviously, the knock on Chris is in the symmetry round. He doesn't score as highly. He hasn't quite got that X frame, and he's a little bit weaker from the back. But, especially at night, he was blasting through the pecs, through the arms, and his level of condition and separation is unmatched, especially when you're on the judges' table and you're up close to it. It looks unbelievable, to be honest with you. And then obviously, in third place, we had Connor Lewis. Now, Connor's probably, the highest scorer for me in the symmetry round. And then, a really nice level of muscularity, but just didn't quite have that hard level of condition that Chris and Joshua had. So I think that's a really tough one on Connor to end up in third, because I believe Connor's actually a former novice British champion and Connor has an excellent physique. But it was just that level of probably, real grainy condition and muscle separation that Joshua and Chris had that Connor didn't. Now, that said, if Connor then brings that up, which is very doable, this can go a different way come the final. So I'd love to see a rematch of Joshua, Chris and Connor with, another level of condition from Connor, because I think that could be an absolutely phenomenal lightweight class come the Britain. And then in 4 and 5, both Paul and Oliver were excellent, lightweight bodybuilders, just ran into 3, absolute, phenomenal physiques in Joshua, Chris and Connor Lewis.
Yeah, it was a brilliant class of lightweight. So well done, guys. And unfortunately, we have to have losers, but we do. And it was a tough one for everybody. Yeah. Our middleweight class was another strong class with Matthias Wimmer winning. Second place was Josh Ellis. In third place was Kobe Quinn. And fourth place was Ryan Savage. And in fifth place was Arne Schaffer. Again, it must have been a tough one for you guys. And again, Kobe throwing a spanner in the works, because Kobe had probably the best symmetry and the best amount of muscle, but didn't have the condition to take on the other guys and ended up in third place. And that shows the standard that we had in that show. But I'll let you unravel once again
Yeah, no, for sure. Very strong middleweight class. Matthias in first, lovely balance, very flashy from the front, great level of width, good condition. Wasn't quite as strong from the side and the back, and that made it a little bit closer. But, I think certainly his level of condition and size and symmetry from the front probably was what kind of tipped Matthias into the win there. John Ellis in second, Josh, beg your pardon. Josh Ellis in second, just didn't have the level of condition that Matthias had, and wasn't quite as flashy. And I think, if Josh was harder, then that probably could go a different way. But certainly, especially from the side, Josh was very impressive, just needed more condition. And then obviously we had Kobe in 3, who's obviously, a former, I believe, junior British champion. Now, Kobe's got a phenomenal physique. It's all there. It's just the condition. But the condition obviously just wasn't at the level it needed to be to take on Matthias and John. So I think Kobe for me was actually straight thirds just based on condition. But obviously if that comes up, then that's a different story. And then, really tough one, I think, for Ryan Savage in 4, because Ryan was in a great level of condition, good level of muscularity, just ran into 3 really good guys ahead of him. But, I thought, Ryan could be very competitive and a good example of a middleweight bodybuilder, really nice condition, especially through his quads. So, Ryan, congrats there. And then Arnie in 5th, played, arguably maybe the most conditioned guy in the class, just didn't have enough muscle to take on the rest of the guys, because this was a really strong middleweight lineup.
Yeah, but I mean, it really was, all the classes are really strong. And I think, referring back to you when you actually won the Britain and you got third in your qualifier. And I think it's not embarrassingly, it's just it shows the standard of conditions. But I think it's good for people to know that, because sometimes when you've been third in a qualifier, you think, it's all over. Yeah. So, it's not. And in a lot of these classes, they very much could go very differently, because the talent pool was very, very strong, as it was when you got your third place. Yeah. So, it's just really saying to people, don't give up, because you can still change things, right?
Things can turn around 100%. So that's why it's so important to do the British final, see where you land, because that's where the money is. It's the British final. The
that's what it's all about. The qualifiers are about the finals. I mean, you're only doing half a job if you don't make the finals. Last up was our heavyweight class, which was taken by Elliot Gibson. And in second place we had Marco Pruka, and in third place Jonathan Dunn, and fourth place Malky Reichardt. And then bringing up the fifth place was Brandon Ojugo. Again, I'll let you unravel.
Yeah, no, really strong heavyweight class. Great to see. And
a heavyweight class.
Yeah, proper heavy. I mean, Elliot weighed in, I think, 99 kilos. I think Marco wasn't far behind him. I think Jonathan was, kind of high or mid 90s as well, which is great to see. So, Elliot, impressive. I think, a lot of firepower up top, especially, kind of chest and arms, impressive. I think probably the only thing for Elliot to bring up for the final, if he is doing it, is just kind of, needs more condition to the glutes and hams. That's kind of the big thing. I think it's potentially why Elliot, didn't quite nip that overall, just based on condition, from my side anyway. And then I had it quite tight between Marco Prusa and Jonathan Dunn. Marco, a lot of muscle, shape-wise, slightly kind of more blocky through the hips is probably the only knock on kind of Marco there. So, it wasn't quite as streamlined, but, again, a lot of muscle. Weaker from the back is what I would say. I think didn't quite as, especially double back lat, just didn't have enough kind of firepower there. So that's a couple of areas to bring up for Marco. But overall, a very impressive physique. But then Jonathan, and I was tight between Marco and Jonathan. Jonathan, a lot of muscle, good condition. I think, for me, and this is one for the final, Jonathan, posing does help, and trying to kind of sell yourself when you're posing. If you can try and smile and really kind of, bang into your poses, because the more you pose, the harder you'll get. And I think, you could really just kind of, come to life a little bit more and really try to get into the mix that way. Because I think, Marco and Elliot, were both smiling, big, really banging into their poses. And Jonathan, by contrast, was a little bit different to that. So, but I thought that, a great version of Jonathan. I thought his conditioning was great. So I think come the final, another push on, that could be a different story. And then Malky in fourth, unfortunately, I think he was probably mid 80s, so he's probably about 10 kilos lighter than the rest of the guys. But had a nice, nicely balanced physique, just needed a bit more of everything, but unfortunately ran into three real big heavyweights on the day. So that's tough.
Same story again, yeah.
So.
Just very, very tough classes. That wraps up our BNBF Northern, and thanks to Alec Mackay, who was our judge on the day. I was only hosting. It's myself, Vicky McCann, so I didn't want to say too much. A few comments I would say that just don't be disheartened with your places, because these classes were very, very stacked with talent, and some people were on it, some people weren't quite on it, and some people can turn things around a lot for the finals. So our finals is the next one up. It's in Perth on the 28th of September, and we're really looking forward to seeing everyone there. Big massive thank you to HR Labs for sponsoring our Northern event. They will also be sponsoring our British finals in a few weeks' time. So thank you to all our sponsors for the help through our qualifiers this year. That is our qualifiers done. Our next Straight from the Table will be discussing our British final and who are the new DFAC pros, BNBF pros, who wins the Grand Prix. So it's all very, very exciting. Alec will not be here, he'll be the other side. He'll be one of the people on stage competing at the Pro Grand Prix. So good luck to you, Alec, for that in the next few weeks. So over and out, and thank you for listening to us rabbit on.